Good afternoon. I'm Jarad Phelps. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police here for Prince William County, and I welcome you to our Facebook Live event as we talk about how policing occurs here in Prince William County and how we can move forward in building our community and building the trust with everybody within our community. Today I'm joined with two esteemed gentlemen who have been working with the department over many years. I have Dr. Sam Hill from Northern Virginia Community College and Mr. Curtis Porter from the Human Rights Commission. He's the chairman of the Human Rights Commission here in Prince William County. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell everybody a little bit about them, and then we'll kind of come back to me and we'll talk about how we're going to run things for today. So, Dr. Hill.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation for serving on this panel. I have had, and I'm going to say, the honor of living in Prince William County since January of 2005, and I came to the county to serve as a provost of the Woodbridge campus since then, and it's been a great place to live. I've had opportunities to have dealings with the police, and they've all been very good experiences, and I'm proud to call myself a Prince William County resident.
Thank you, sir.
Good. Deputy Chief, thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm Curtis Porter. I've had the honor of serving as chairman of the Prince William County Human Rights Commission for the last 27 years. I'm somewhat unique, as I always share. I'm a native of Prince William County, over 200 years of family history in the county, a family that was free prior to the Civil War and landowners. So needless to say, I have a great commitment and investment in our community, and happy to participate today.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. So today we're trying to make this as close to an open forum as possible. If absent COVID, we would be out meeting with groups as many times as we can just to hear your questions and hear what you have to say and kind of relay how we do police work here in Prince William County. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that right now. So this is kind of the next best thing is I have Dr. Hill and Mr. Porter here to ask your questions and they maybe dive in a little bit deeper on anything that they might think of while we're here, and so that we're having a give and take. I'm hearing what you have to say as from the department standpoint, and we can answer as best we can. So they'll be shooting the questions at me, and we'll have conversations, dialogue about everything, and we'll see where we go. So that's kind of the setup, and we'll go with whichever one you want to start with.
Do you want to take the first question?
I'll do the very first one. Deputy Chief, I think the first question coming in is what strategies will be utilized to ensure all citizens are treated fairly?
That's a very broad question. We've got a lot of things that we do here in Prince William County Police Department to ensure that everybody is treated fairly, and it really starts with our hiring practices. We have a very in-depth process on how we hire people. Out of all the applications that come in, we only hire about 3% of all those that apply. So it's very stringent for our process. Everybody goes through a thorough background check. We go out, we ask neighbors, we talk to family members, we talk to previous coworkers. Everybody goes through a psychological test as well. They go through physical testing. And then once they make it through all that, everything is looking good for them. They meet with me and the chief before they're even hired. And every single person who comes through the door, we talk to them about the core values here in Prince William County. We talk about integrity. We talk about our honesty and integrity policy, that if they're founded to have been untruthful in any official capacity, that they're going to be terminated flat out, because that is at the core that started with this department 50 years ago with Chief Owens, and has continued all the way through, and that's something that we hold very dear to our heart here as a police department and as a profession. So, and then we also talk about how they're going to police here in Prince William County. And we talk about fair and impartial policing. We talk about unbiased policing, and basically treating people with dignity and respect at all times. It can be hard sometimes, given some of the stressful situations that officers deal with. But the bottom line is we can't take away anybody's dignity. That's something they own, and that's not something that we're here to do. So they hear, we have those conversations with them, and then we reinforce those all through their academy and all through their career here. I think both of you gentlemen can attest to interactions or things that you may have attended where you've heard that come from officers. They talk about our integrity and how they hold it dear. So that's kind of the training. And then we reinforce all that with our in-service training. We talk about, during our in-service training, we have cultural diversity training, in addition with our basic training, but we reinforce the different concepts, expose our officers to what's out there in our community, that we've got a very diverse community here in Prince William County, very diverse, and it's undergone actually very quickly.
Yes.
It has changed over very quickly from the time, I'm a Prince William County native myself, but from the time that I got hired in 1996 to where we are now, I mean, you think in 25 years, this community has changed so much, so fast. So we talk about that. We talk about the difference, the cultural differences that are out here, and expose our officers to that, so that yes, when we're on the scenes, yes, we need to make things safe and do the right thing, but people may not understand, and trying to recognize when that may occur so that they can, be flexible with how things are, and just expose them to that. Because we do have a very diverse police department experience-wise, and we're working on improving our diversity as well within the department, but it's slow. It has been slow. But yeah, there's some challenges there, but we'll get into that. So some of the other strategies that we employ are policies and procedures that are out there. We definitely, first and foremost, in all of our policies, our use of force model, we start with the sanctity of life. That's the core of it. We value everybody's sanctity of life and making things safe for everybody who we serve. And then we also talk about our duty to intervene, making sure that we do the right thing, and that what our actions, or I should say our reactions to behaviors, should be proportional to what is going on. So, well, yes, we need to, if we arrest somebody and they resist, we need to overcome that resistance to take them into custody, because we're bound by law to do so. But our overcoming that resistance should be in proportion to what we're being met with. It should not be a huge jump in some of the things that have been seen across the nation. So we also talk about our communication. Communication is our number one tool. That starts in our use of force model. It's all about communication first and foremost. And we train our officers to utilize their mouths first and try to gain compliance. We're participants in the CIT program, where we train officers in crisis intervention training, recognizing when people are in crisis, whether it's drug or mental health, whatever a crisis is, on trying to de-escalate the situation to the lowest level so that we gain compliance. That is all throughout our use of force models, constant reassessing of what you're dealing with to make the proper decision, so that you're not making those significant jumps and you're staying in proportion with what you're dealing with. And I'll talk about our oath. I mean, we swear to protect and serve the citizens here in Prince William County. We swear an oath to the Constitution, but we also take an oath of honor. And this is modeled after the IACP from many years ago. And in that oath, we swear, we take an oath to our badge, to our integrity, to the citizens of the county, to make sure that we're accountable to ourselves and others for our actions. So we take that very seriously here. So that's just kind of a few things. There's a lot more that I'm sure we'll get to, but I feel like I'm rambling right now, so I just want to kind of, if you guys want to have any follow-ups, or if we want to go to the next one. Or.
Well, I excuse me, just mention one thing. You talked about how the county has changed and the diversity in the county. And I think Prince William County has the distinction of being the first and only majority-minority county in the Commonwealth. And I consider that a very honorable distinction.
It is, absolutely, and we need to celebrate that because it is a strength of ours. It's how we have differences of opinions. It's how we can make our community stronger. It's an opportunity for us, not a hindrance at all. It's an opportunity for us to make things better for everybody.
Well, we've got one more question.
Okay.
And what are the current methods for de-escalation?
So I think it kind of goes back to our use of force model. It starts in our academy. We talk about, when our police officers go through training, it's 6 months long, and they are trained throughout the academy to use the proportional amount of, whether it's command presence or if they have to use force, the proportional amount. But that constant reassessment, we don't teach a continuum because that indicates a straight line. We teach a model that is circular, so that you are, it's basically based off a critical incident or critical decision-making model where you're receiving information, you're evaluating that information, you're taking action, and then you're reassessing what you're doing, and you're constantly in that circle. So that's where it first starts at. And that model came from our work with the Police Executive Research Forum. We were actually leaders in helping them. We were one of 7 jurisdictions that was a testing area for them in their training scenario. So this is a national model that's out there. It's not something that we dreamt up or anything. We worked in conjunction with PERF to have this decision-making model, and it applies to not only how you investigate, but or on the scene of something, but it also leads to dealing with somebody who you may have to tangle with, or an active shooter, because we're constantly reassessing in a tactical environment, and it brings it all together. It's applicable no matter where you're at. It's a decision-making model of intel, decision, reassessment, and kind of going through that circular motion. So we're always looking to use the lowest level possible, always, in that constant reassessment.
You had spoke a little earlier to the psychological evaluations of your officers when they're recruited and in training. So the next question, does the department require sensitivity training and have officers conduct a psychological exam every year? Do your officers go through that?
So I'll tackle the second part first. The psychological exam every year, no. They are mandated to see or have testing when they're hired. But we don't mandate it unless we see an issue that we need to do a fit for duty on somebody. Then yes, we can mandate that, but it's not every year. However, we have a wellness and resilience program or center here in Prince William County, and it started several years ago after we experienced several officers take their own lives. It was a traumatic time for the department. The cumulative stress of an officer is huge. And we were seeing several officers took their own lives. And the Chief Hudson, Chief Bernard, in conjunction, they went to the board and said, we need help. We recognize we need help. And they brought on or started this program in conjunction with our community services, to where we have this resilience center now where if officers need something, whether it's personal or work related, they can go see them, they can go talk to them. And I will tell you, we've had it for about a little over 3 years now, and it is widely used. I've used it several times myself, and it's been a tremendous benefit just to be able to talk, if nothing about work stuff, what you're dealing with at home. It's a free service available for all officers, so that they can get mental health help when they need it, and it's paid dividends and tremendous dividends to our officers. So, to the sensitivity training, yes, I wouldn't say sensitivity training directly. We do undergo cultural diversity training and ethics training. So that is done periodically. So yes, we are talking to our officers about interacting with different cultures and knowing that we need to treat people with dignity and respect, and that we can't let biases, our own personal bias, we need to be aware of our biases, number one, and that they have no place in decision-making in law enforcement, that we have to deal with the facts of situations. But we need to be aware of how people are different. If we go into a home of one ethnicity, that things may be different. You may not get to be able to talk to somebody initially because of cultural differences, and whereas if you go to another household, it's going to be totally different. So we're aware of that and trying to work with people on that. But at the end of the day, it's about our safety and safety of everybody involved in trying to find a solution to the problem.
Well, the next question deals with some sensitivity, ethnically, and special needs.
Wow.
What policies, training, and assurances are there for adults of color with special needs when interacting with officers?
So I'm going to focus on the special needs part first, because that is huge. That is a huge issue in our community, in how we interact with them. I talked about our crisis intervention training, those that are in mental crisis and dealing with them. But it's not just that. It's dealing with autistic individuals or those that have some type of physical handicap or their drug addiction or anything else. That CIT training helps tremendously. Now we have a little over a third of the department that is trained, and we're evolving into doing more and more each year. But it's intensive training. It takes a long time to get through that, but it is all about recognizing, taking our time with individuals and trying to assess what is the true nature of what's going on. Just because somebody is going berserk in a house, that doesn't, that's just a snapshot of what's going on. We try to get down to, okay, why? Is there a reason for that? If we can make it safe and take our time with the individual, then we need to do so. And understand, all right, what's the best course to handle this. It's dealing with the majority of what we do out there. A lot of times arresting somebody is not the right choice. It's not the right thing. It's about what is right for the situation at hand. Sometimes we do have to arrest people because it's too violent, or they committed a violent crime or a crime, and we have to go down that path. But a lot of times, especially when we deal with people in mental health crisis, it's not criminal. It's not a crime to be in a mental crisis. They need help, and we're typically that first call, and it's about trying to make it safe and get them the right resources available to them. And a lot of times we're getting calls where they want a CIT officer to respond, which we do. We accommodate those requests as long as we have one available. Starting in July, we've been approved to start a co-responder unit where we're working with CS, where officers, it's not going to start up in July. It's taken us months to get to how it's going to work and everything else, but you will see officers responding with a therapist from community services to homes of individuals in mental health crisis, because it's imperative that we get the right resource as fast as possible. And there's a delay if we go there and then have to take them to a therapist. We're bringing the therapist to them. We're making things safe so the therapist can do their job. So we kind of look at it more of a globalistic aspect, not necessarily for one race or another. We really have to handle things what is right for, number one, the situation, but our policies and how we do things, it's about everybody. It's not about one race or anything else. It's dealing with the problem at hand and how do we safely do that, because we're all affected by it. And mental health doesn't affect just white people or somebody from or an African American or Hispanic or whatever race or ethnicity you are. It affects us all. So when we look at a problem, we look at it globalistically. And making sure that we're doing the right thing the right way. That's where it really lies, on what is the right thing to do given the situation that we're dealing with. And that's a hard concept sometimes for officers to try to find. These are complex problems in our society, and it's hard find what the root problem is sometimes. So.
You
Dr.
know,
Hill, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The previous question just kind of sparked a thought, and I worked with the deaf and the hearing impaired for almost 20 years, and the thought that came to mind would be talking about special needs. A police officer encountering somebody who's deaf.
Right.
And deafness is typically described as the invisible disability.
Absolutely.
You know, and that I can just imagine that being interesting.
Well, to that end, it is. If you get on the scene of something, and obviously let's say it's a stressful scene, whatever else, and we're yelling commands for somebody, we're dealing with somebody who's deaf, we need to, and that's where our training comes into, is recognizing that. Recognizing the difference between somebody who is ignoring us versus someone who can't hear us. Sometimes it's very subtle. It's very subtle. I'll give a prime example. It's a few years ago, and this isn't a deaf person, but it was somebody who was in the middle of a stroke. They had a crash, and all the symptoms looked like the person was intoxicated, off balance, everything. But there was just something that was different about that. And I arrived on scene much later as the officer was dealing with it, and the person was stuck. They were stuck on just repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, I would not have known the differences unless my own mother-in-law hadn't just recently had a stroke, and hearing some of the symptoms about that. And when I saw that individual and realized what was going on, that they were just stuck on saying the same thing, I was like, there's something wrong medically here. It's not the fact that he's drunk or anything else. There's something wrong medically. We got the medics in, and his blood pressure was through the roof, and we were able to get the medical help that we needed. But sometimes it's those subtle differences that it's hard. It's very, very hard. And dealing with somebody who's deaf, it's hard. You've got to be perceptive sometimes, and it can be very easily overlooked, very easily overlooked. So it's... And some people may see it, some people may not. And if we make that mistake, then we got to find out how we made that mistake so that we can educate everybody on the department to that experience, so that, again, it's in the back of their mind should they come against it or come up against it later in the future.
Dr. Hill, this is like it might be down in your alley. Would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Will college degrees be required for officers moving forward? I certainly hope so.
I will say a college degree right now is not required by state requirements. It is definitely a preference for us. However, college degree isn't the end-all be-all. It really isn't. I've got a master's degree. I've worked through college. There's a lot of other people out there who would make great officers who don't have a college degree. Sometimes it's about their experience, and really being a good officer is about their integrity. Whether or not that individual has great integrity and a commitment to serve, that's where it starts. The education piece is great. It helps, it develops their capability of learning, adapting, everything else, but so does our military. Our military experience brings out a wide berth of experience of somebody because they've been around, they have different experiences, and they can bring them back to us. So, yes, college degrees are important, but they're not the end-all to be-all, because we cannot discard somebody's value just because they don't have a college degree. There are individuals out there that can make great officers without it, and we need to evaluate those individuals. Every individual who applies to that standard, whether or not they can just be a great officer based on what they have, what they're bringing to the table for us, and it starts with their integrity.
Okay. Next question is a two-part question, and I actually will probably have, I know I will have a follow-up to it.
Absolutely.
Do officers have body-worn cameras? Part one. If so, who's issued them?
Okay. So yes, we started the body-worn camera program. I think we're going into our third year now. I think it was around 2017 that we started this. And every patrol officer every canine officer, every crash officer, crash investigator, every school resource officer, every traffic unit, our motor officers, all of them wear body-worn cameras. It's a little over close up to about 450 officers who carry cameras. Those, and the reason why we started with them is our department is almost 700 officers, and we focus on that because those units that I described are the ones that have the greatest contacts with citizens on a daily basis. Our property crimes detectives, they do a lot of stuff, at their desk investigating. It wouldn't do very much, have a lot of value of having a body-worn camera on them. So in this regard, we're putting where the highest exposure of citizen contacts, they're the ones that have body-worn cameras, and it's worked well for us. The officers, while there was hesitancy at the beginning, they have come to really wanting to have the body-worn cameras on when they're on a scene of something, because majority of the times it's just showing how they do things right day in and day out, and their behavior doesn't change just because they have a camera. They're doing the same thing every single day, but having that camera obviously just adds a layer of trust. We get that with our citizens, but it also validates what the great work that our officers do.
And actually, as a follow-up, to that two-part question, there have been issues nationally when there have been, fatal shootings.
Yes, sir.
That police have been involved in, where for some reason the officer did not have the body camera on.
Right.
So my question is, what's the policy for maintaining the body camera being on?
So in general terms, our policy says that it has to be powered on all the time. Now we activate the camera where it's starting to record anytime that they are going into an enforcement type of contact. So if we are, let's say we're an officer's at 7-Eleven getting a cup of coffee, and they're having a conversation with somebody, they're not going to be recording that. That's not an enforcement type of activity. For traffic stops, yes, they need to turn it on because that's an enforcement type of activity or potential for enforcement. Now, if we're at that 7-Eleven and through that conversation something happens and it turns into an enforcement, let's say that the person shoplifts while the officer's there and they notice it, then they have to turn the camera on and document that interaction. There are areas where it's required to be off. To be blunt about this, because it's about protecting people's privacy all at the same time. So when we're in the hospital, we're not recording anything because the privacy of everybody else involved. Obviously, when we're in the bathrooms, we're not recording. When we're interviewing victims, we may or may not have it off depending on the sensitivity of it, because the victim may not want that camera on, especially if you're talking with somebody who has just been sexually assaulted. We may not, that's probably not going to be the best time to have that camera going because it's about their privacy. So we have to balance that. It's easy to have a blanket policy. It's got to be on all the time. But it's really about finding that balance in between documenting what we're doing, our actions are, and the privacy interests of everybody who's involved. And we've got to find that middle ground. And I think our policy is there for the most part. And we train our officers when it has to be on. We rely upon them to activate them when they're supposed to. And when they don't, we find out that they don't, then we take corrective behavior action on that for when it comes to our attention. Now, I will say we review body-worn cameras consistently. We have audits that are done by the squad supervisor, the watch commanders, and then we also, any use of force or complaint that we receive, we review every single body-worn camera that's related to that. So if an officer gets into a use of force, there's 4 or 5 officers on scene, we're watching all that. That's an automatic. We're watching every single body-worn camera that captures that incident. And then So there's a constant, we have an audit in place, but we also have the review as far as investigations go. And even though we may be investigating one aspect, if we find or see other aspects that are against policy, we address those. We don't just say, okay, we're only focused on here. We address everything that we see that is incorrect. And it's more about correcting that behavior, making sure people have the proper training and they're doing the right thing. Sometimes a lot of times it's just a happen chance mistake on their part, and it's like, okay, you need to pay attention to this, and then we just bring it to their attention. And if it needs to be more than that, then obviously we'll go down that path. But the overwhelming majority, we're having talks with those officers on how to fine tune and better serve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You know, I think I seem to remember that you may have sought public input before the policy went in.
We did.
Yeah.
We did, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Our policy, we pushed it out to a lot of citizen groups to review. So we sought citizen input in the policy that we have. It's been presented multiple times to a variety of groups. Mm-hmm. It's online. It's accessible. It's open to everybody to see what our body-worn camera policy is. We're not hiding behind anything on that, so it's out there for everybody to see. But yeah, we sought a lot of public opinion on where that policy began. And just like everybody has an opinion in one side versus the other. We're trying to find that middle to, again, make sure that we're capturing what we're doing, but we're also protecting the privacies of everybody who may be around us at the time.
Yeah, and that is true. That's a good point, because the Human Rights Commission, we were engaged in looking and reviewing that policy and giving input along the way.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the next question, how many officers are CIT trained? Is this required?
So we have about 35% of our patrol officers or our officers trained in CIT. The training itself is a 40-hour training, so it's a week long. It's very intense, and it takes a lot of resources to put to train these officers. We're part of a regional group between us, the Sheriff's Office, the ADC, Manassas City, and Manassas Park. We kind of regionally teach our officers to certify them in CIT, and we're all vying for this training. So our office, we have a certain amount of seats, and all these other jurisdictions and other departments within those jurisdictions are trained in it, like our Adult Detention Center, Manassas City Police, the Sheriff's Office. We have therapists that attend. We have therapists that help teach this as well. They're part of that regional instructor block. So it's we have about 4 classes a year, and they can only train so many per class. So we want more. We continue to evolve and add more CIT officers and get them through this training. So that's where we're at now. Since we started CIT to where we're at now, we're about 35%. We will continue to move forward and continue with this training. And I'm sorry, I lost track of the last part of that question.
How many officers are? I lost track too.
CIT training.
Right.
Yeah.
So that and it's I'm sorry. Is it required?
Yeah.
No, it is not required to attend through, but our officers want to attend. We've got officers that just are waiting to attend this class because they see the value of it. We've had so many successes with those that have attended, and the skills that they've learned to be able to apply on the street, in stressful situations. So it's not required. I don't see a need to require it because we're filling the classes every single time. People are they're thirsting to attend it. And we hold it as an in-service. We want people to have a little bit of experience going into that class so they can take the skills and be able to apply it immediately, versus somebody who has been in the academy, doesn't have the full experience yet, and not knowing how to use those tools. So there's different philosophies there. Some people would say it needs to be part of basic so that they have it coming out. Well, that's great, but that's a tool that needs some experience to be able to know how to apply it in certain situations correctly. So we've reserved it as an in-service class where once you graduated the academy, you can go back and obtain the certification, because then at least you have a little bit of experience and know how to apply it correctly.
Okay. You touched a little bit on the psychological evaluations, but this question is, discuss the evaluations someone goes through before becoming an officer.
So we talked about the psychological testing. There's a series that the psychiatrists that we send them to, they take their tests, psychological tests that they have, and then they also do an interview with those individuals, and they provide a recommendation to us. That's one level. The other part is the backgrounds that we put our officer applicants through. And those are extremely thorough in the fact that it starts, I'll give an example here of, say, a 21-year-old right out of college, just left the house with mom and dad. We're going to talk to mom and dad. Let's see what kind of kid they were growing up. We're going to talk to any friends that they have. And this is, again, all self-reported to us. They give us this information, so we go talk to them. We also talk to previous employers. We'll go back throughout their work history and try to identify supervisors and talk to them. If they were a previous officer, let's say they came from a different jurisdiction, we're going back to that department and we're looking at what they did there. We're talking to supervisors there, other officers there. We're looking at their personnel file so that we have a good, true picture of who they were as an officer there. In peers, we're talking to co-workers, what type of employee they were they reliable, do they make good judgment decisions, how do they handle stress, we're getting all that information from them. They go through a polygraph exam as well. So they are asked a series of questions where they have to report answers. And then the polygrapher will sit down with them, go through those answers on the machine. And we're basically testing their veracity to making sure that what they're telling us is true. And we're working with that. So those are kind of the three main strategies that we utilize for not necessarily all psychological, but there are ways to determine a person's viability for being a police officer here in Prince William County. Now, we've also pushed off in conjunction with PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum here recently, with a study on our recruitment strategies, on what we're doing. We're looking, number one, are we doing things within best practices? And this is something we started back in 2018, towards the end of that, and PERF was awarded the grant. So this is well before all this stuff, what's going on nationally that we're seeing. We started this well before this, and it was just recently awarded back in January for PERF to have this grant. So they're reviewing our hiring strategies, comparing it to other entities nationwide, getting citizen feedback on what our hiring strategies are, talking about people who've been through the process and those that we've not allowed through the process because something's popped up. They're talking to them. The purpose of it was because we wanted to identify how we can increase our diversity in our hiring practices. But while that is one of the main focuses, we're also looking at it globalistically at the same time to making sure that we're doing things right.
You know, and as a follow-up to that question about the various evaluations, I mean, I know nationally the discussion now is officers who had difficulty in certain departments.
Right.
Moving on and getting hired in other departments.
Correct, yes.
And that's part of the discussion nationally as far as, legislation, potential legislation coming forward. So in your evaluation, do you weed out those officers who had problems in other departments?
Absolutely. When we're looking through somebody's from a different department, we're looking at them through green eyes, basically. This is a fresh look at us that we're looking at through their personnel history while we're there. We're talking to supervisors and employees there because we want a true picture of what we're getting. We don't want officers that are problem officers just jumping to a different department because they got into hot water there and they think coming here will be, I can get out from underneath it. We don't want those officers. So we're doing everything we can to identify those individuals. And if something pops up in their background, we say thank you, but no thank you. We're not willing to compromise our department in that manner. All right.
I think you said you accept 3% of the...
We hire about 3% of all those that apply.
Are there any common threads as to why folks may be rejected?
This is anecdotally, so I don't have the hard facts of why that. I can definitely get those. A lot of them have to do with previous drug history, reported drug history that they've told us. Some of it is criminal history. Some of it is they just don't have the integrity. They've determined somewhere in the process they don't have, they haven't demonstrated where they have that integrity strong enough for us to say, yes, we want to bring you on. Those are kind of the three big ones that I'm aware of. And the drug one it's a moving target. It really is, given the way, especially we'll take marijuana, how marijuana has changed over the years. When I got hired, you did marijuana, you didn't get hired. You didn't go through the process. Now it is the way, the frequency and everything else, it is kind of leaning in a different direction where we'll continue to look at that individual because we all make mistakes. And now that it's turning into a civil fine, it's being decriminalized effective July 1, that's going to affect hiring practices as well. So we're constantly evolving our standards based on what the law, number one, tells us that we can do. And looking nationally, what are other departments doing and compared to us? Because we're all vying for the same individuals. I mean, in the local level here in Northern Virginia, it's kind of like there's a pot of applicants right here, and we're all trying to get them. We're all trying to find the ones that rise to that top. So it's a competitive process amongst us and other jurisdictions. But we are, I would say, and I'm proud of this, is that we are a leader in that we attract great people and we hire great people to do the job here in Prince William County.
Good. The next question, how long does a new officer train the academy and in the field before patrolling alone? Okay,
so our academy is 6 months long. 6 months, Monday through Friday. They do it's not a live-in, it is a report to every single day. That's your place to work for the day. But they do that for 6 months. They're learning how to apply law, criminal law, constitutional law. They're learning control tactics. They're training how to drive correctly. They're learning how to utilize all the tools on their belt. They're learning how to handle different calls for service, and they're tested throughout the entire time, not only with written tests, but in practicals. They actually have to show an aptitude in handling a call for service. And these are all requirements through DCJS, which is Department of Criminal Justice Standards, or services that monitors all the training and sets the standards. But our standards are above and beyond what DCJS requires. So while they go to these practicals and they have to pass them according to how we say we're going to handle these, let's say domestic. We have very high standards, I think, here in Prince William County. Having been the academy director and an academy instructor, I'm very proud of our academy and how we train our officers, because the academy, it's all about hands-on instruction. It's not a lecture type of thing. It's you got to hear things, you got to see things, and then you have to do things. That is how you really learn to apply the knowledge that we're trying to impart on them. So we focus all three of those together to kind of give them a basic. And it is a basic academy that they're learning all this. This is how we generally handle something. Then they go into a 45-day FTO cycle or training, which is roughly 450 hours that they're
What's
trained.
what's FTO?
Field Training Officer.
Okay.
Or, thank you. Sorry, I should have explained that. So the FTO program is where they're riding with an experienced officer, and they're the ones taking lead, but that field training officer is there with them, shadowing them, evaluating them, making sure they're handling things, number one, safely, and then also according to our policies and procedures and the laws, and to making sure that they're viable. So only once they've done the 6 months of training with us, which is about 900 hours of actual training, and the state minimum is 480, so we're doing double the amount of training hours in our basic. The FTO period is 450 hours. The state minimum is 100, so we're doing well above that. So that's about 9 months right there of just training alone before they're in a car all by themselves. And so it's a long process to actually get an officer from the time we hire to the time that they are by themselves. You're looking 9 months to a year, and depending on where they land, holidays, all those stuff, it could be a length of time. But you're a minimum of 9 months of actual training to be an officer. That is significant, very significant. It's a huge investment from the department and the county into that individual to be here for a law enforcement career. And that's what we want, is individuals for careers. We're hoping for that.
So is it, can an officer have that training period extended?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So if the basic training one, no. That training is not extended. So if they don't pass the basic training, there are potentials for them to attend another academy, but they will not complete that training unless they passed all components. And those examples where they may be, we call that recycled, where they go to a different academy, typically are done because if they got injured, then we'll recycle somebody. If they have failed a standard, failed to demonstrate, the majority of those are thank you but no thank you. Now, there could be exceptions there and there depending on what they actually failed, but for the overwhelming majority, they've demonstrated that they can't do the job at this point. So when they get into field training, sometimes people are a little slower than others, and we say it's a minimum of 45 days. So that is the minimum amount of time that they're in that field training time frame. It can get extended. It can be extended for maybe they just didn't get all the experience that or see the types of calls that we want them to see, and so we may extend it a couple times. It may be extended because they're having difficulties here and there. They're starting to get a little bit, but they're a little slow on the uptake on some things, so we want to extend them a little bit more. Excuse me. We've had people who get deployed, military personnel who get deployed, so we have to extend them because they've been gone for a significant amount of time. So we have to extend that process as well. So or for injuries, we'll extend it as well. So those are just some of the examples of why we extend somebody. And if at the end of the day, once they get through field training, we've told people, I'm sorry, but your performance in field training is not acceptable, and we've separated with them as well. So it's not a guarantee that just because you get into FTO, the FTO program, that you can become a full-fledged officer by yourself. So.
And I would imagine they're on the payroll.
Absolutely, the whole time. Yes, they are on the payroll. So as soon as we hire somebody and send them to the academy, we are paying them the entire time. So all through their training, they are getting a paycheck. They're employees of Prince William County Police Department the entire time.
So it's quite an investment.
It's a significant investment, yes, sir.
Yeah, it is. The next question, obviously, as a county, we've grown a lot.
Yes,
as you said, this year I think the census is going to take us up to somewhere like 470,000 people, very close.
Probably, yes, sir.
Yeah, very, very close to that. And Prince William County has always been pretty much a young county as far as our population. Of course, we're aging a little bit now. But we're still a young county. So the question is, how does the department reach out to youth in the county?
That's a great one. It starts with our school resource officers. They're in all the middle schools and all the high schools. We've got over 30 officers committed to those schools to to be that first line. And a lot of those individuals take on secondary aspects within those schools. They coach, they mentor in clubs, so that's one level. We also have our Police Explorer program that's within the schools as well. So, and again, this is kind of sponsored by our school resource officers. They're heavily involved, but this is a way for them to, show the youth what this department's all about. And they meet and they kind of go through certain aspects of our training, a small glimpse of it. We familiarize them with certain things. But more importantly, they give back to the community. They're involved in events within the community as representatives, and we're teaching them about service. That's the primary aspect there. It's service to your community. So they'll jump into events. I know a couple years ago, they were involved in the Pennington 5K is an example. Pennington School there, right off of Stonewall Road. They held a 5K to raise money for the school and for other aspects, and they went to help them. And again, it's about the community service aspect. We have other ways that we engage. Some of our other officers are coaches. They just take it upon themselves to be coaches, whether it's in an organization or through the school. They're coaches within this community. We reach out during, especially during Christmas time. We participate in Santa Cops, where we go around and try to help those who are financially struggling to make sure that they're having a good Christmas, and we take them shopping so that we have that connection with them there, and trying to build, making their home life a little better during the holidays aspect. Well, those are some of the few ones. So we have Pizza with a Cop. We've done that several times as well at some of the schools. So we're always looking for more ways. I mean, that's just a quick highlight. It's not enough. But first and foremost, our job is engaging with the public, regardless of our assignment. It's about community outreach and working with our community. So we've got more to do. We really do. We've been doing it for many, many years. We've always had strong ties with our community. But as our community has, as you said, the population has exploded, getting out there and connecting with them, it makes it harder. The more people we have, the harder it is to connect with everybody. And so we're just trying to, any aspects that we have, we're going to go out and do. I know another aspect that just came to my mind was in certain schools, we go and read to the kids on Dr. Seuss Day. We'll go into the schools, and they assign a group of kids to us, and as they're rotating through, we're reading books to the children. So we're always looking for ways to especially our youth, to connect with them and build that trust with them.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, has there been any effort, any discussion, particularly about reaching out to African American youth in particular? And the reason I say that, people are becoming accustomed to the term "the talk" now. Yes, that particularly have with African American male youth, young drivers, right, who do oftentimes have concerns about being stopped by a police officer. Yes. Has there been any effort either in the training academy or outside of the academy and how to work closer with that population? Absolutely.
So actually we did a joint venture not too long ago. We've done it several years.
Safe Passage Home.
Safe Passage Home, yeah, where we've done that. We've gone out and we had a panel discussion with young African American males specifically, but it was open to everybody. But in talking about how to conduct yourself on a traffic stop. It applies for everybody. I mean, we want everybody to be safe. So we talk about what it's like for an officer when we walk up on a car and the safety things that we're looking for. And we talk about the perceptions that are back and forth. And we actually do role playing as well. So we kind of go through that process. So that's just one example. I believe one of the fraternities works with that. I can't remember which one off the top of my head though, but
Innova partnered with the Prince William County Police to do what the chief was saying, and I happened to attend one of them. There was a police car, and it was role playing, and we had a very nice turnout. And I know it was at the Woodbridge campus and also at the Manassas campus, and there were some candid questions asked of the police, and it was very informative. Very informative.
So we also teach something similar to that. Our school resource officers in the schools go to the new driver classes and talk about different laws and trying to educate them, but also what to do if stopped and how, so that everybody's informed. I will say I've had that talk with my daughter because she's a driver now, and if she were to be pulled over, because it's about safety overall, and so what she can expect if she were to be stopped. And no, don't get stopped. No, I'm talking to my daughter right now because I'm sure she's watching. But what to do, what she can expect of the officer if she is stopped. So it's a general safety talk in my eyes. I realize that I'm not trying to minimize anything, but I want my children to be aware just as much about what to expect if they're stopped by the police, because it is about safety for us. It is about furtive movements that we look at behaviors when we're dealing with individuals, and it's behaviors that we're keying in on about things. It's nothing else. Are there furtive movements? Are they keeping their hands where we can't see them? And hands are what will hurt us, and we want the hands where we can see them, so that, again, trying to ease that tension that comes up on both ends. There's tension there on whoever gets stopped, but there's also tension from the officer because it's an unknown. It's an unknown. Over 100, on average, over 140 officers are killed every single year. A lot of them are on traffic stops, and there's a heightened sense of awareness with an officer when they're dealing with the unknown, and it's just about making sure everybody's safe. We're looking for behaviors. We're watching behaviors. We're trying to make sure everybody is safe all at the same time.
Great, thank you.
Now, here's the next question. Is a good one to follow on to the earlier question about training. Are there continuing training requirements for officers to maintain their certification? Yes,
sir. There are. We are required to recertify every 2 years, and we have to have. I can't remember the number right now offhand. I'd have to look it up, so I don't want to tell you wrong. But we have to have a certain amount of just career development hours. It's continuing education type of training. We have to have a certain amount of legal refresher number of hours, and we also are mandated by state law to have, or DCJS, to have a minimum number of cultural diversity trainings within those 2 years. We exceed those every year, so we pretty much do cultural diversity training almost yearly in some fashion. Sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's online. Given with COVID, we've moved a lot of our trainings to online just so that we can make sure that we get it out there. But we exceed the state mandate as far as recertification for our officers. And with that training goes, as a big aspect of this, goes into we retrain on use of force and decision making. That is a big thing, is that we're constantly reviewing that policy. We're constantly talking about that policy with officers, giving them practical applications of that policy to ensure compliance and ensure they're using that decision-making model so that we're using the least amount of force.
So one of the questions I have about discretion, is there any discussion in your training about the discretion an officer has? And the reason I ask that, I actually served on the Department of Criminal Justice Services Board appointed by Governor Wilder. So it's been a while back. And we actually had some hearings on driving while black at the state capitol. This would have been back in the 90s. And we had a law enforcement agency come in, and they basically talked about, you know, the discretion, you know, that they have. You know, kid did something wrong. Well, they knew the family, so they were able to take the kid back to his home rather than, you know, take him into custody for any particular reason. So, is there a lot of discussion on that about the discretion an officer uses on how they, you know, conduct their business?
Absolutely, and that discussion begins during their basic training because there is discretion. When it comes to a felony, there's zero discretion typically in the cases like that. So, but anything that's a misdemeanor and non-violent, there's a lot of discretion. A traffic stop is one of those aspects where, okay, I make a traffic stop for speeding. I can make the decision to issue a citation, or I can just let the person go. That's my discretion. But in teaching that, we try to talk to the officers about, number one, being consistent. Consistent application of ethics and the law are very important, and you have to find that consistency. But there are those situations where, hey, if I stop somebody, whatever they're telling me, I may say, you know what, okay, in this instance, it probably isn't the best to issue a citation. What we want is voluntary compliance with the law, especially when it comes to speeding. Speeding is a problem in our neighborhoods. By far, that is one of the largest complaints that we get across the board, is that we have speeding in our neighborhoods, and we don't want to see anybody killed. I've had the unfortunate pleasure of having to tell family members that somebody has died because somebody is speeding. I don't have a lot of experience in that, I'll be honest with you, but I have had that misfortune. We have many officers on this department. That's a bulk of their job. Our crash investigators is making those death notifications because somebody was speeding, driving while intoxicated, reckless driving, whatever. We had a huge fatal on Cardinal Drive just a few weeks ago, where she actually was complaining to us days prior about the speeding, and we had been making enforcement efforts, but she was killed by somebody where speed was a factor. So speeding is a problem. So we need having that discretion and trying to balance, okay, this is the major issue, but we want voluntary compliance. That's what we're trying to get. Sometimes compliance comes with actually issuing a citation. That's just a one tool that we can get that, because we want the community to be safe and secure for everybody.
One of the things we know that law enforcement is a stressful job. Our offices provided opportunity to receive counseling for stress.
Absolutely. So I talked about it earlier, the Wellness and Resiliency Training, or Center. They actually come out and teach us about stress, and they kind of use the military model because it's likened to law enforcement because of combat and the stresses that our military sees in combat is similar to the stresses that officers are dealing with day in and day out, the constant ups and downs. And that constant up and down is cumulative in where they're at on the stress continuum. And it has a huge effect, especially if you don't have a way of relieving that stress and finding productive manners to kind of reduce that stress, whether it's through time off or activities or whatever else, or talking to somebody. So they come in and they start that in the basic academy. They have time blocks where they talk about that, and then they also come to roll calls periodically to kind of remind us of that. And they are open, as I said earlier, open to meeting with anybody. At any time, they will come speak to an officer to talk about stress and give them strategies to help dealing with whatever issue that they're dealing with. That is a tremendous resource for us. And like I said before, I've gone and it has helped me on issues where I've been stressed out and trying to employ the strategies. So But not only do we have those individuals, but we also have our peer support team. And these are officers who are trained to be ears, to kind of listen to officers. Everything they say is confidential unless the officer has an indication that they're going to harm themselves or others. Then they have a duty to speak up. But everything else is confidential. Even when we talk to the therapists in the Wellness and Resiliency Center, it's confidential unless it gets to that point where they're a danger to somebody else or others, and then we have a duty to interact. But so it's between the Wellness and Resiliency Center, we've got our peer support team, which is, again, our officers on the department. They understand the stressors. They know what resources are out there and can help guide that person. Or if it's just, you know, let's chat over a cup of coffee and talk about what's going on, because that relieves just somebody to listen and understand what they're going through. And maybe they've had similar experiences, but just being able to talk and understand what I was going through makes a world of difference. Because it's not talking to somebody who's, you know, maybe trying to give you suggestions, and you're like, you just don't understand my job. And of course that doesn't go well. Anybody who's had an argument with their spouse and they say, well, you don't understand me, that just doesn't go well sometimes. So it's about trying to make those connections and relieving that stress. We also have our department chaplains. They're a great resource for us as well, to where they can bring calm and peace to us as well on scenes and to the citizens. We can call them out to help citizens within the county. So those kind of three aspects there within that help our officers reduce stress. And we also have our gyms. I mean, physical training is a key component to stress reduction, and we have gyms in every one of our stations where officers can work out and keep fit. We have a gym at our academy. We can go to a fire station, so we have other aspects as well. And we also do training. It's part of our in-service training where we bring individuals in to talk about it. Not just our Wellness and Resiliency Center, but we bring in nationally known speakers who have either written books or they're just nationally renowned in their field to talk about those aspects and ways to give us strategies on how to help ourselves, help each other as well. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, the next question is very timely in light of what's happening nationally. How many reports of excessive force is tolerated before an officer is terminated?
No, excessive force is not tolerated, period. One aspect of excessive force is going to have disciplinary repercussions. So every use of force that an officer is involved in is investigated. It's investigated by a supervisor. Once that supervisor writes up their investigation, it has gone up the chain and reviewed by another level, and then another level to ensure, number one, that all policies and procedures have been followed, that the use of force was necessary, that the use of force was proportional to what was encountered. And that goes all the way up to myself now, and it went all the way up to Chief Menard and previous chiefs before. That we read every single one that we have to ensure that everything is done the right way. So, and if in an instant of an excessive use of force, well, we're going to deal with that. We're not going to just say, okay, that's okay, we're not going to brush it under the rug. That does not happen. If we have an excessive use of force, we're going to deal with it, and we have dealt with it in the past. We have had issues with very, very, very small few, but we deal with those in a disciplinary manner. And if need be, if it had to go to a criminal aspect, there is that possibility as well, depending on what the situation is. So, but excessive force is not tolerated here at all, period.
Okay. To follow up on a question I had asked earlier, in particular focusing in on driving while black, I was on a call earlier in the week with the Phi Beta Sigma Alumni Association of Virginia State University, and one of the questions in that dialogue or that conversation was, do you capture data on the people that are involved in a traffic stop, you know, pretty much racial, ethnic data of who who may have been pulled over by the police.
Right. So currently, right now, the only data that we capture is if a traffic citation is issued. Okay. However, starting July 1, HB 1250 was passed and signed by the governor, and that requires us to capture that data, race, gender, ethnicity. It also requires the location of the stop. It also requires whether the vehicle was searched, whether the person was patted down, a couple other things that are on there. So there's a set requirement there that we have to capture this data now starting July 1, and we'll be in a position to do that. So yeah, we will be collecting that data to ensure that. Now again, that it will be for the driver of a traffic violation. That's kind of where we're starting. Or that's where the law starts. And so right now, no, but yes, we will be in a position, yes, and we will be capturing that data here soon.
And will that data be accessible to the public once, or are you developing policies on it now?
We're in the midst of developing a policy right now, so it's we're trying to get through that. It will be all that information is required to us to send it to the state. So yeah, there will be a component where that information is available to the public. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
And I will volunteer the Human Rights Commission to help you with that if you'd like.
Absolutely.
The next question from the public: are chokeholds allowed in Prince William County?
So, easy answer is no, and I will say but. So we do not teach our officers anything regarding pressure on the neck or anything else to put their hands towards the neck, period. But I will say, in a deadly force situation, if an officer is faced in that situation and that is available, that is the only thing that's available to them, then yes, it would be an acceptable means. That because it would be no different than if I had to use my firearm in a deadly force situation, it's a deadly force situation. My life or the life of somebody else is in danger. That's the only time deadly force can be applied. So it's, in that regards, it would be okay, but any other time, absolutely not. We don't train our officers that way. We don't even train our officers to apply a choke. So again, in a deadly force situation, it's kind of it's life or death at that point, and in whatever means that you can save your life is kind of where it's at. So, but prior to that, no, you cannot use a chokehold. Cannot put your hands around somebody's neck. We actually, even if it looks like it, we will kind of pull that officer aside and kind of give them some quick training on, or training on what they did and how it looks and the dangers of what they've done if it goes down that way.
Thank you.
The next question: who decides what records about prior employment are reviewed?
Well, ultimately, it comes down to the chief of police as far as what records that are reviewed. But we have a policy in place as far as what records that we're going to go through. Our head of our personnel bureau kind of maintains them to ensure consistency in all our investigations. That if we did look at this aspect of their employment, so that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's of an investigation. They review it, and so when it comes out from the background investigator, it's going through the chain of command for review to ensure that we've done a thorough and consistent job with our investigations. And then it comes all the way up to my level, the chief's level, where we're reading those investigations before we meet with the person to offer them employment.
And Deputy Chief, I think I can answer.
Go ahead, answer
this one.
Go ahead.
I can answer it too.
Yeah. Does the department have a Citizens Police Academy? I actually was in the very first graduating class when it was created. So the department does have that. So a follow-on question would be: how does someone become involved with the academy?
Well, that's a great one. And Dr. Hill, I know you went through the Citizens Police Academy.
I was number 38.
38.
38.
Yeah. It's been that long.
Yeah. So we've been doing the Citizens Police Academy for over 20 years now. Yeah. And it's a great program. It's a 10-week program where we are giving citizens basically a snapshot of each part of the department as you go through that program. It starts with how we recruit and how we hire, and we kind of walk all the way through the different aspects of the department, patrol, criminal investigation, special operations, our forensics, internal affairs, our Office of Professional Standards. They get a lot of information through those 10 weeks. And it's a great time. It's one night a week. Typically, I think it's like on Wednesdays, but it's for 2-3 hours tops where you're learning all this information. And it's a great way to connect. It's a great way to learn about the department. And then it's a great way for us to interact and engage with the questions that our citizens have. And so a way to attend is that we typically do them twice a year. We're researching a different way now because of COVID, whether or not we can do an online version and the effectiveness of that. But we will have them. We have them twice a year, and there's an application on our website where you can go. There's a link for Citizen Police Academy. You can go to the application, fill it in, and send it into the email, and we'll be in contact for the next opportunities.
Great. Thank you.
You know, another, and I don't know if you'd call it a program, but and it's a part of the academy also, is a ride-along.
Yes, sir. That's it. Thank you. That's part of that Citizen Police Academy is that we offer ride-alongs to everybody, but those are often offered to everybody. Now, right now under COVID, we're not doing ride-alongs. We're hoping to open that back up at some point here, but any citizen 18 years old or older or resident of Prince William County who's over the age of 18 has the opportunity to go on a ride-along I think it's once every 6 months, at least once a year, but I think it's once every 6 months that they can do that. So they can learn firsthand the types of calls that an officer goes on, interact with the officer or officers that they come in contact with, and ask questions. And it's a great way to actually learn what an officer goes through day in and day out. And it's a great way to learn whether or not you want to be a police officer. We highly encourage people to come and learn about the job, especially if you want to be an officer, because we're hiring. We are hiring every single time, every day. We need officers. We need good quality officers. So I highly recommend. So you can do that at any district station. A citizen ride-along application is on our website as well as our applications for hiring. And you can just click on this link, send them in, and we'll get the ball rolling with it.
The next question is, what is the complaint process?
Okay, so in a nutshell, anybody can go to any police station or make any phone call or go to our website. We have those 3 ways that they can initiate a complaint. So I'll kind of walk through. Somebody shows up at the station, all they need to do is ask for a supervisor and speak to that supervisor. They will have come with a form for that individual to fill out as far as has some basic information and what their actual complaint is. And if we're able to kind of talk about it right then and there, we will talk about some of the basics of it. But once that complaint form is filled out, it is then sent up to our Office of Professional Standards, and they will assign it to an investigator to look at. Typically, it is a lieutenant of the squad, but there are cases where they may give it to another supervisor on that squad, or they may elect to investigate it themselves, the Office of Professional Standards. So it just depends on the nature of the complaint. So, and then that supervisor who is assigned to investigate, they will speak to the complainant and all other parties who are relevant to surrounding that complaint. And that investigation is then forwarded up to the chief of police, as the acting, to me for review for final determination of what the outcome is. That can happen. If you don't feel like you want to go in person to a station, you can just call in and speak to any supervisor, and we will take it over the phone. Or if you want to be more anonymous, you can go online, fill out the complaint form, and send it in, and we will investigate it from that aspect. So we have 3 different ways that people can reach out to us to fill out a complaint. And There are times where, a lot of times, where we initiate our own complaints, where we've heard of something, and the person we've already initiated, and somebody comes in to make that complaint and say, okay, well, we've already initiated one. We'll add you to this as somebody who we can speak to. But we're very proactive, especially on big things where we're like, we need to take a look at this. This doesn't look right. We need to. This needs to be investigated. So, and I will say the overwhelming majority of our complaints that we have, especially on patrol officers, we're able to go to the body-worn camera now. We're able to validate a lot of things, and we're finding that our officers do things right almost majority of the time. And on the whole, they do things right. Are there minor things here and there that we can do better? Absolutely. But the body-worn camera program has shown that our officers do the right thing the right way every day, and that's what they strive to do.
Okay. Next question. Does the department require verbal warning prior to an officer shooting their weapon?
Require one? No, we do not require one. However, it is the way the wording of our policy is. It is when feasible. When feasible, they will give a verbal warning. There are instances where it is not feasible. You're dealing with an active shooter in a school coming up on that somebody, and they're getting ready to pull the trigger and shoot somebody else. It's not feasible to give a warning. We need to stop that threat from somebody else getting hurt. So the way our policy reads, because we have to think of a lot of different aspects of this, is that we need to give the officers flexibility in what they do, but at the same time maintain a set standard. So our wording says when feasible, they will give a warning, realizing there are instances where we just can't. It's not safe for the officer. It's not safe for anybody else who would be involved that we would to give that warning, because we're putting more lives in jeopardy if we did. So, and it's something that the officer has to gauge. They have to, when they're in that, they're the ones who have to articulate why they use deadly force and why they did certain things. So and they know that, and that they would have to say, oh, I couldn't give a warning because this. That's part of the policy. They would just have to explain it. And if there were any deviations, and it comes down to the articulation of why they did what they did at the time that they did.
The next question, do officers have a duty to intervene?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a law enforcement officer, it's important that we're doing the right thing the right way every time. And if we see something that is wrong, regardless of who that individual is, we have a duty to stop the wrong that's occurring. We've seen countless cases of officers standing by, particular one, what's on the current rhetoric in social media, what happened in Minneapolis, and that we saw an officer doing something wrong. And in all case purposes, when we arrest somebody, we have to safeguard their life. They're in our custody, and we have to safeguard their life. We are responsible for them. So when we take that very seriously, we have to protect them because they're in a vulnerable state. Their hands are typically behind their back, and that's by policy, because we're trying to make everything safe. So we have to take extra precaution and protect themselves, and to protect us and protect the rest of the citizens when we have somebody in custody, and we have to protect them. And when we see a wrong that is occurring, our duty is to intervene to make sure that we're doing the right thing the right way. Our office, it comes down to our integrity. I said at the beginning, our department lives and breathes by our integrity, and it is so important that we are ethical in what we do, and that we maintain that integrity for our individual, because by maintaining the individual integrity, we're maintaining the department's integrity, and we're serving the citizens of Prince William County in the best manner that we can.
And that's really the statement. It leads me to tie back into the issue that happened in Minneapolis. Yes, and I know that one of the officers that's been charged as an accessory I've heard his attorney say that he was only on the job 4 days. And my thinking is whether you're on there 4 days or not, some things your integrity is involved, and then there are some things that are ethically right.
Correct.
So that would have been an appropriate time to intervene. To me, even if the lead officer had 20 years and you had 4 days, you know what's right and,
Yes,
and what's wrong. So
yes, you do.
I guess that's more of a commentary than a question. So,
but that's what it comes down to. Just because we're officers,
yeah.
we're people first and foremost.
Right.
We are individuals. We're members of this community. Overwhelming majority of us live here in Prince William County, so this is our community as well. And yes, but when it comes down to it, we're individuals. We know what right and wrong are, regardless of what my profession is. I see something wrong. I'm empowered as a police officer to make sure that wrong is stopped and I'm doing the right thing. That is my responsibility as a law enforcement officer. When you take a step back and look at it at the 30,000-foot level, that is my responsibility. That is our responsibility as law enforcement officers, is making sure the right thing is done. Do we always do it right all the time? Absolutely not. Again, we're human. We make mistakes. But as a department, we look at those mistakes, make sure the person has the right training, and then we can kind of set them forth again so that they don't make that mistake again. But I mean, that's what we're doing. Obviously, depending on the mistake, we deal with those. We have to address those things. We don't put blinders over our eyes. For me, it is about addressing what you see right then and there and dealing with it, because you can't gloss over issues. Once you gloss them over, they manifest into something else. And the manifestation is something much bigger than what the original issue is. So if you deal with the smaller issue when it's small, you won't have the bigger issue. But it comes down to, we're human. We know what right and wrong is. And we are, if anything else, we're bound as a human to make sure the right thing is done. We are empowered as law enforcement to make sure that the right thing is done.
Okay. The next question, are officers banned from firing their weapons at a moving vehicle?
That's a very, I can think of a lot of different scenarios where, yes, we would want officers to ban from shooting at a moving vehicle. And as a general rule, we will not shoot at moving vehicles. Our policy, the way it's written, is that only as a last resort are we allowed to shoot at a moving vehicle. And I'm going to take us back a couple years. Overseas, with these terrorist events, we were seeing vehicles being used as weapons against citizens. And if we had a policy that banned it, we would not be able to deal with those situations. And those people will continue to hurt other people, our citizens, if that incident were to occur here. Recognize that shooting at a moving vehicle, bullets not going to stop a car. We know that. Bullets will not stop cars. It's just not happening. But you're dealing with the driver and what their intent is at that aspect. So if that is the last resort, then yes, an officer, if they can articulate that it's a deadly force situation, that's the only thing they had, yes, they would be allowed to. But by policy, it has to be a last resort option to be able to shoot in a moving vehicle. Otherwise, no, they can't do it. It's not, anytime you pull the trigger on your firearm, you are responsible for where that round goes. That's ethically, that is by case law. We are responsible for where that round goes. So if we mistakenly hit somebody, we're responsible for that. So we have to make sure that when we're in that deadly force situation that we're doing the right thing. And it is not an easy thing to do. It is not easy to sit here and to pull that trigger. It's just not. So as a last resort only would it be allowed because of the terrorist incidences that we're seeing. And it may be a viable option to stop somebody to save somebody's life. That's what it comes down to.
You know, and you've touched on this next question, but I'll go ahead and read it anyway. Are officers required to exhaust all other alternatives prior to resorting to deadly force?
In a perfect world, yes, they would. However, dealing with individuals, especially when their emotion or irrational, I should say, decisions get made that could escalate it very quickly one way or another. So if I'm talking with somebody and things are ramping up, yes, I should go through all the different aspects. Well, if talking doesn't work to gain compliance, then I may go to OC spray. If OC doesn't get compliance, I may have to go to a baton. If they're assaulting somebody, I may have to use some type of taser or electronic control device. Ideally, that would be kind of where we would go, but unfortunately, life isn't like that. Life is, we're here and automatically we're over here in an instant. So I may not have the option of going through all the options. What we train our officers to do is to use the least amount of force possible to gain or compliance and or stop what's going on. That is how they're trained. So I may be on the scene of something, and all of a sudden, in a split second, it may turn into a deadly force situation, especially when we're talking with terrorism. Somebody's walking down the street, and all of a sudden, they pull out a weapon on somebody. Well, I've gone from presence to a deadly force situation. I don't have time, nor is it safe to deal with the middle. And that could be applied on a lot of different scenarios as well, where we've gone from 0 to 160 in a bat of an eye. But it's about training our officers to receive the intelligence, make a decision, act on it, and reassess constantly so that we're looking at it and reassessing, this is the right thing to do? Okay, keep going with what I'm doing. Oh, no, I need to back off. Mm-hmm. It's a constant reassessment in our decision-making model that's important.
Yeah. I think I remember, again, years back, it was almost like 5 stages with the officer being presence, mm-hmm. the officer's presence being one, right. and then deadly force being the last, and right. You jump 1 to 5.
Right.
I mean, it may be more than that now, but that's been.
Yeah, that used to be as far as the use of force continuum, where you would go up a line and balance your actions with that other one, and it was like it was perceived as a step by step by step. And in some regards, it is like that.
Right.
But it really is about receiving, interpreting what's going on, evaluating your options, making a decision, acting on it, and then reassessing. That's where it kind of goes in a circular motion, that we constantly need to be looking at what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Because at some point, that intel, okay, the action stopped. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I need to stop what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Act on that. Assess what's going on. Do I need to do something else? It's a constant thing that we're on the scene of something that we're doing day in and day out mentally. We're constantly looking at that, reassessing. It's the same thing when we use force. We have to look at it, decide, reassess. Is this right? Keep going. No. Okay. Back off. It's that reassessment piece that's so critical.
So your officers, do they work, 12-hour shifts? Is that what
10-hour shifts.
10-hour shifts.
10 hours. Okay. Our patrol officers work 10 hours a day. Then we have 3 different shifts: an evening, a day shift, evening shift, and a midnight shift. Mm-hmm. So they're constantly rotating through, but they're on a 10-hour shift on the schedule for 10 hours now. That can go longer depending on what they're dealing with, right. But on the whole, it's 10 hours.
Right. Okay. Are officers tasked with hiring other officers, or is this done by an outside agency?
So, I'm not sure what that implies to hiring other officers. Let's take. I'm going to take this as a mutual aid type of question, and where we have officers from other jurisdictions come in to help us. And that is an agreement that we have amongst the other police agencies within the region, that if something were to happen here where we need immediate support and additional resources, whether it's officers or types of equipment, we can make a phone call and they could be here to help us out just like that, to deal with whatever the situation we are. State Police is a prime example of that. They're a support agency. You make a phone call to them, they will be here to support you. We have that same agreement with Fairfax, with Loudoun, Alexandria, Arlington, Fauquier, Stafford. So as a region, I can send officers to go help them. We send officers, have sent officers up to help U.S. Park Police during the inauguration and 4th of July, because that is such a resource draining event. They need so much staff up there to be able to handle the crowds that they have. So, in order to make things safe. So yeah, we have that ability with agreements in place to be able to help each other out when needed.
The next question, are background investigators other officers, civilians, or outside agency?
So we have a kind of a mixture in our personnel bureau where some of our background investigators are sworn and former detectives, and then we also have some civilian background investigators. So it's kind of a mix. There are pluses and minuses with both of those. With a detective, you're getting somebody who's looking through things through more of a one lens versus a civilian who may be a little more neutral type of thing. But we have a mix of it, and they talk amongst themselves to ensure that the cases, the investigation is done completely and thoroughly before it's sent up. So there is collaboration within the Bureau on investigations.
So the next question coming up, has the department done a diversity audit where everyone on the force is questioned about their ability to participate and be respected and heard? So I would think probably, have you done an audit of the diversity on your department? One. Okay. So, and I guess the other part would be, of your officers, do they feel like they are respected and they can be heard? Okay. So we'll take it as a two-part.
As far as diversity within the department, we know, we've known for years, and we've been working hard to improve this. Our diversity is not representative of the community. We know that. We're working on that. We have been trying for many years to improve the diversity on this department. And we've made some strides, but we're not where we need to be. It's very slow to move that needle because this is a career. It's a 25, once you get hired, it's a 25-plus year career, so it's hard to move that needle when you have people that are here for so long. It's just, it's math, really. But we are moving that needle slowly. But we're nowhere where we need to be, and we realize that, and we're working on that. Part of the reasons why we went and we hired PERF to conduct this study was to help us, okay, where can we improve our hiring practices so that we can be more diverse? And they are evaluating that, and they're supposed to have a report to us by the end of this year. So we will have hopefully some tangible things outside of what we normally do. We're like the rest of the region. We're comparable in our hiring practices and where we are with diversity, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. So we brought in the outside PERF to take a look at that from a third-party perspective to find out what we're doing, what we can do better, because we go to speaking for our African American diversity here within the department, we go to the all-black colleges and try and recruit. We're in the communities, going to different workplaces, trying to recruit, military, trying to recruit. We do all that, but what are we missing? And the recruiters, they do a great job. They brainstorm all the time. They're coming up with great ideas, and it's like, all right, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. So they don't. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, but we also want to give them the flexibility to say, okay, if they have an idea, let's give it a shot and see if it works. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then let's move on to something else. But we are hoping for some tangible results or thoughts from PERF on what we're not doing that we can do when they look at it holistically across the nation.
You know, the to that question, we host on the Woodbridge campus and the Manassas campus a law enforcement fair, and it is a large event. The first floor of the Phelps building is full of law enforcement agencies there, and that's, you know, to your point about there's a small pool and everybody's trying to pull from that, and I'm always impressed by the number of agencies. We have people that come from as far south as south of Richmond. What's
Petersburg area?
Petersburg, and but I don't know if the Prince William County Police Department has an in with the faculty there. They always seem to have the choice location in that
Yeah, we
fair.
may have a little bit of an in. It's, I mean, going to all the different events and job fairs, and even a presence online within social media, the way technology is today, it's evolving. It's not only, we're dealing with a different population group now, just in their experience with technology, and let's be honest, I'm older. I'm not as adept with technology as as my daughter is, and those in her age. So it's hard to keep up with things as fast as technology is moving. It's just hard to keep up with it because it's constantly changing. So we try to stay up on it so that we can reach out and at least have some type of visual footprint in those avenues to help us. But recruiting as a whole in a profession is down. It's down. It's having people who want to be police officers these days. It's we're not seeing the numbers we used to, and I don't, for whatever personal factors or national factors that may be going on. It's just as a whole, we're seeing a decline in the interest in becoming a police officer, and it's very unfortunate because. In my eyes and in the eyes of everybody on this department and those that I know in this profession, there's nothing greater than serving your community. Nothing greater. And this is our opportunity to be able to do that. And it's a great opportunity to be able to do that. So we're looking for ideas. If anybody has thoughts on how we can improve our recruiting efforts or our diversity, we're willing to listen because we need help. That's just the bottom line. We need help because we need officers. And, I mean, a lot of us, I mean, it's, as I said, we're here for a career. And once our career is done, we're waiting for somebody else to kind of take over and the younger generation. And if it's not there, then what happens? And we just want to make sure that we're leading and leaving a great department for our community. And it starts with our recruitment efforts and getting the best people here. So we need help. That's the bottom line. You
know, one of the things, I think obviously working very closely with the new communications office here in the county, because you have to figure out a way to really promote this county as being a great county to be. And Dr. Hill mentioned it, you know, earlier about the diversity that we have in this county. As a matter of fact, this is one of the most diverse counties in the nation.
Absolutely.
And if there's a way to encourage people of diverse backgrounds to come to a diverse county where you have an opportunity to succeed, that would be a good strategy. Not that you guys haven't already done that, but certainly I think that's a good conversation to have to promote Prince William County better as a place to be in. We're not some rural county. We're the second largest county in the state. You know, so just thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the last part of that question, I don't think we've addressed was, do our officers feel comfortable, especially our African American officers or Hispanic officers or whatever? I'll be honest with you, I don't like using the term minority because I think that puts a group lower than somebody else, and I don't believe in that. So it's the diverse part, or diversity. But I have had conversations. We have policies in place, number one, where if somebody feels like they've been discriminated against, they can come forward. There's a process. There's an anonymous process that they can work through to make sure that their issues or the incident is investigated thoroughly and handled. So where we would engage our EEO officer to be part of that process so that we make sure, and then obviously Human Rights Commission we get involved as well. So there are ways for members to report discrimination or in any regards. So we have that, but I've also gone around to here recently to talk to some officers because I wanted to verify. I wanted to, hey, if we can't take care of things internally, then externally we're not doing the job right either. So we've got to make sure we're doing it right internally amongst us. And I've had conversations, quite frank conversations with individuals to make sure that we are doing things correct on the inside. And from what I'm being told, again, I haven't spoken to everybody. Everybody has a different experience, but we are doing it right. And that kind of goes outwardly so that if we're doing it right inward, we're doing it right externally too. And again, there's going to be one or two times like that, but I'm talking on the whole, we do it right here in Prince William County.
Great.
You know, I'll share a thought, maybe get on a soapbox. But I've had the opportunity to go through the Citizens Academy, and as a part of that, there was a ride-along. And prior to that, I'd been on three ride-alongs before that. And they all have been a window into the community, police relationships. And the community I was in before, that was the first ride-along. Did it with the local police and with the sheriff. And my takeaway from all of that is you can tell a lot about a community by the relationship between the police and the community. And if I were to ever live someplace else or have the opportunity to live someplace else, before I made a decision, I would do a ride-along. And I would do a ride-along in I would say the low-income area, that community, and the high-income area, and just see how it tells a lot about the community and the police. And I've done ride-along after I've been in communities, and fortunately I've made the right decisions in where I've been. But if I were to move again, I would do the ride-along before making that decision, because I've learned a lot about Prince William and the way the police relationship says a lot.
Absolutely.
It says a lot.
It does. I mean, how we interact with our citizens on a day-to-day basis is the cornerstone for how we do our job. And it starts, like I said before, it started with Chief Owens when he created this department in 1970. It got stronger with Chief Dean, under Hudson, and even under Chief Bernard, where we are here and we are going to treat people with dignity and respect. And all the other stuff is just noise when we make a decision. It has no bearing in our law enforcement decisions, but we need, this job is about relationships. It's about the relationships that you build because the community works with us. It is a hand-in-hand process. It is not an us versus them mentality. It is we are here to work together to solve our problems, to make this a safe and secure community. That is the only way we can do it, is together, and we have to have those relationships. Have to.
And you know, and the important thing, the ride-along, it's not just the police's regard for but it's also the community's regard for the police. And it's two-way.
Absolutely.
And the way the community regards the police is probably the real measure of that relationship. So there's the next question, can you speak to the riot that occurred in Manassas a few weeks ago? Actions of those there and the law enforcement.
Okay. So we had an incident at Sudley Manor where what started off as a legal, peaceful protest over the incident in Minneapolis and getting a message out that Black lives do matter. That started off as a peaceful protest. And then at some point, and again, I'm going to talk this in generalities, I'm not going to get into specifics, but at some point, the group, members of the group, took it to a different level, to where people who were getting into the roadway, and we had citizens' cars being jumped on, we had citizens being assaulted as they were trying to get through there, and as we were trying to get into that area to kind of calm things down, we were met with items being thrown at us, bottles, rocks, bricks, everything. We were met with a lot of hostility from, I'm not going to say everybody, because not everybody was there to be like this, but we felt like, or that's what we were met with. So we had to call in state police to assist us, and an unlawful assembly was declared. And when an unlawful assembly is declared, we are required at that point to restore peace. It's in the code. We are required to restore peace. Sometimes restoring peace to disperse that crowd requires just movements. Sometimes it requires using chemical agents, which was used. And in this case, some other aspects were done, but the effort was there to disperse that crowd because of the damage that was occurring, the danger to the public that was happening. So that's kind of what happened. It took several hours to finally get it under control, and we're still looking into investigating certain aspects of that. So again, I can't get into the details right now further than that, but that's kind of what happened in a generality.
So just a follow-up question. I know that the chief called a meeting with a number of community leaders
Absolutely.
on the next day to certainly talk about that.
Yep.
And from what I have gathered, subsequently, with various events, they've been very peaceful. The police have been very helpful in shutting down roads for the people to exercise their First Amendment rights.
Absolutely. So I was here at that meeting. I spoke at that meeting, and it was a meeting of members of the community to hear, because we wanted to be open, transparent about the events, because we also recognized that we needed to find a way, number one, to talk about it, but how do we move forward with it, because there's going to be other events, and we don't want these other events to turn like this. So that was the whole kind of to have that conversation, or at least start that conversation, and it's an ongoing conversation as we move forward, because we are here to protect everybody's First Amendment rights. We swear an oath to the Constitution and the rights that people have. So regardless of the message, we are here to protect First Amendment rights. And that's what we have done. On these other events that happened, they have been very peaceful. We've been able to work with organizers and say, okay, no, you can't be in the road. I mean, that is actually against the law. You cannot just walk down the middle of the road. But when it has happened, we're there to protect everybody's safety. So we've made the decision that, all right, we shut down a road to protect their safety. For whatever reason they're in the road, that was the right thing to do on some of those calls or some of those protests to facilitate the safety. And again, sometimes it's about discretion. We want to balance people's First Amendment rights versus obstruction of traffic. Well, it's discretion. It's trying to work together and be flexible all at the same time. And it's not a black and white issue. It's not, as far as demonstrations go. It is about balancing, okay, what is the right thing to do here? Because they do have a constitutional right to this, but it's to be done peacefully and legally. So at what point do you push that as far as the legal aspects, or they're violating this law, they're violating that law? It's trying to find that balance, and there is no this, and it is, as a community, it's trying to find what the right thing to do is. And I think we've kind of struck that balance in the protests that have happened beyond that. We've sat down with organizers and kind of laid out, all right, these are the parameters that we need your group to operate under. We need you to hold each other accountable, because that's what it's all about. We can't police our way out of certain situations. It has to be our civic responsibility as citizens, as residents, to hold ourselves accountable as a community to ensure that we're making things safe for everybody. We want people to demonstrate. We want people to get their message out. But we've got to be able to do so in a legal and peaceful way so that people can hear it. Because when it goes the other direction, when it gets violent, those individuals are hijacking the message. They are taking away somebody's opportunity to get their message out and using it to their advantage. And those individuals are criminals. They are the ones that we want to be able to separate from and say, okay, let us deal with the criminals. You separate yourself from what's going on so we can deal with them so that you can get back to your message. And it's finding that balance to make sure that we push that message. Accountability on all levels. We have to hold ourselves as officers accountable, but as residents and citizens of Prince William County, we have to hold each other accountable as well to make sure that we're doing things right and call it out when it's not, and enlist our help so that we can take care of those issues. So I think we're getting down. It's hard to believe it's been almost 2 hours already. So I think we're kind of gonna wrap up here, and I want to thank both you gentlemen for being here. It's I hope for those of you that have been watching that it's been a wealth of information for you. I know I enjoy talking with these gentlemen all the time, and they've done a fantastic job here for me. So thank you, gentlemen. I do appreciate that. Any closing remarks that you want to make?
No, I'll just say it's been a pleasure chatting with you in the open dialogue that we've had and that we will continue to have. And if the Human Rights Commission can be of assistance, we're happy to do that.
Absolutely. Dr. Hill?
The only thing I'd add is I would encourage people to try the ride-along program and also to apply for the Citizens Academy, because it was quite an eye-opening experience for me. And what was your most memorable? What do you remember most about the academy?
Well, it was just again, I was in the first academy, but it was just great just to get a good sense of all the work that the police do, even the crime lab and so on. Mm-hmm. So it was very memorable.
What was yours, Dr. Hill?
The toughest one for me was the Special Victims Unit. Mm-hmm. The Special Victims Unit. First of all, I didn't even know it existed, mm-hmm. and it was tough to see how we as human beings can treat each other. Yep.
So just so everybody knows, our Special Victims Bureau, they investigate a majority of our crimes against children, whether it be online or physical, or in that respect. And it is one of the hardest jobs on this department. It really is, because you're dealing with you're dealing with victims who we can associate so easily as our own kids. So it takes a toll on the detectives, because it's in everything. I mean, police work in general it's complex, and it's difficult, and it's stressful, and let's be honest, it's just flat out hard. It is very hard to do sometimes. Our officers are dealing with people who are in crisis, and that's the overwhelming majority of what they do, is handling people who are in crisis. whether it's mentally, whether it's physically, financially, it doesn't matter. The individuals are in crisis at some point, and they are constantly dealing with stress. And it has its toll on them. And while we have the tools available to them, sometimes it's hard to find the positivity in life. It really is. But when you have that effect on someone, on an individual, and you have an impact on their lives, it's like all that negativity goes away, and you remember that one positive impact, and it's like, you know what, this is why I became a police officer, to have this effect on somebody and to contribute to my community. And that's what the officers here in Prince William County are committed to doing. I wholeheartedly believe that. That's what they do. When I get around and I talk to them, we're just trying to do the right thing for our community. And it's just, so I encourage, as Dr. Hill and Mr. Porter have said, the Citizens Police Academy is a great opportunity. Ride Along is a great opportunity. Please go to our website. We have a footing, obviously, here on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Go to any one of our social media platforms to learn about us. Reach out to us. We have community engagement events all the time that we push out for information-wise. But we're also willing to come to your engagements and have conversations, be present, just to be part of the community. So the way you can reach out to us is just go to our website. You can contact us to let us know of your event. We'll be glad to have an officer there. You can go to pwcgov.org/police, and you'll be able to go through any one of those links to make contact with us. Again, we have a footing on Facebook at PWC Police. You type that in, you'll be able to find our social media pages. So I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to present here. Again, Dr. Hill, Mr. Porter, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. We'll have more some more community engagement opportunities in the future. Please go to our social media sites for that, and then reach out to us and we can come to you. So thank you and have a good evening.